Bella Thorne, actually, it's her story. And she's gone on record to share this. I heard this from her mouth when she was doing a podcast. She said that when she was 10, there was this director that had the gall to tell her agent that the reason she didn't advance in the auditions was because he was uncomfortable because she was flirting with him. She was 10. Hello, and welcome to Embodying Mystical Mac. I'm Mac. If you are new here, thank you so much for joining. If you are returning, thank you so much for returning. It's been a little while. Lately, we've gotten the episode with a deer that we do every month, but it's been a little while since I've sat down and recorded. If you are returning, you probably were expecting this, but we don't have to dive into all of that right now. I'm actually, I don't know if excited is the word, but I am, all of the adjectives I'm thinking about imply positivity, and this is not really like a positive topic, but I am, I suppose, feeling positively about the fact that I actually sat down and am recording this right now, because I've been going through a little bit of mental health stuff, and I've found my procrastination cropping in again, and this has actually been outlined for a bit. I've wanted to do this for a bit, and the fact that I sat down and I'm here doing it is awesome. I've got my going through shit outfit thing going on. I've got my hat because apparently that makes me feel more secure. I've got my hair in like pigtails because apparently that makes me feel cuter. And we're rocking the no makeup, like the actual no makeup look, because I am breaking out everywhere. If you're someone like me who was really lucky to not have dealt with acne in puberty but deal with it in your adulthood, I feel your pain. We'll get through this. But yeah, like normally I would have gotten a little cuter. I would have probably done something a little bit quirky and maybe a little purposeful. Maybe not quirky. Again, this subject matter is not fun to talk about. But yeah, this is what we got going on. And I've dilly-dallied forever now. Let's just get into it. So I don't know what this episode is going to be called, but I titled my notes, "The Child Star Conundrum." Because what is it if not that? Okay. Now, I am not the first to speak about this, not at all. There have been some excellent videos that I have watched myself on this child star conundrum. A lot of them, albeit, focus on the downsides, and granted, I will too. Spoiler alert of this. However, and very few offer solutions. Not that there's like an ultimate solution, or, like I don't claim to know everything. Like, what the fuck do I know? I'm just someone that I'm highly aware of the fact that the child star conundrum isn't going away. So how can we better the situation is where I come from when I'm thinking about solutions. But we'll get to that at the end, because I've got my handy dandy notes here, because I do believe that part of my procrastination was the fact that this is a heavy video. This is a heavy subject matter. This is not something that I want to misspeak or misrepresent my views on. And what's really interesting is, not saying that everyone out there doesn't have a phase where they wish they were a child star. I still, till this day, think about what my life would have been if I actually had been a child star. Because I see how, if certain circumstances had lined up in such ways, I could have ended up one in this lifetime. And so it's really interesting to think about this too, because I'm oftentimes I'm coming from a place of like, and I have a whole video about this. It's called, I think, Why I'm Glad My Childhood Dreams Didn't Come True. But I have a whole video about this. But essentially putting myself in this place of like, what if I was that kid, right? And then knowing what I know now, having not been a child star, and being able to develop somewhat normally, as opposed to in the midst of fame. So all that to say, I am aware that plenty of people have spoken on it. I believe that I can bring a unique perspective, and that's what I hope to do here. This is one of those things that we're just gonna have to keep talking about and talking about and talking about until our society and Hollywood itself like catches the F up. And you know what? This is really interesting. But Hollywood being like 100 million years in the past comparing to actual society, which is already like thousands of years in the past. So Hollywood is like light years in the past. That's gonna come up in another video very soon. So very interesting synchronicity there. But basically, this is just an issue that we need to keep talking about, and we need to exhaust and exhaust and exhaust until something gets done about it. Because it is a child star conundrum. Because they're not going to go away. We're not going to stop putting little kids and little babies in movies and ads and in this or that. Like, it's not going to happen, in my opinion. Like, we're not just gonna all of a sudden create like dummies for those positions or like robots for those positions. Although honestly, like a good use for like a super realistic robot probably would be that. So we never would have to put another child in the child star conundrum ever again. But I am a firm believer of, and this is where some of you might be like, oh, bitch is crazy, bitches woo woo, whatever. I don't care. It's fine. Your opinion on that doesn't affect me any longer. Thank God. I've worked on that so hard. I am a firm believer in soul contracts. I'm a firm believer in the fact that this thing, this little spark of light, right, that is in our bodies that leaves when we die, when this body dies, it's so intelligent. It is intelligent beyond our imagination. It's as intelligent as the intelligence that is nature, creating individualized forms that work together in symbiosis and having all of the exact number of things as for things to work out beautifully and perfectly. Anybody who's looked deep enough into nature or spent enough time with nature understands what I'm speaking of. This sort of ancient, indescribable, not tangible wisdom and intelligence. Somehow nature is intelligent enough to create us. And that intelligence has to come from somewhere. Now, before there's anything physical, there's the soul, there's the spiritual. These are all my beliefs. I'm not stating fact here. These are all my beliefs, all right? Just because they feel like fact to me, not stating fact here. I feel like I have to disclaim in the age of the world that we're in. That intelligence needs to come from somewhere. And what I logically think it to be is the soul, the spiritual. And this soul knows what it's doing to a degree, actually to lots of degrees. It's once it mixes with the physical body that it gets a little tricky. But essentially, this soul knows exactly what the F it's doing. And if I had meant, like if it was in my most beneficial life contract to be a child star and to go through that kind of trauma, that is a thing that would have happened. That is a thing that has happened for a lot of humans in the world today. And I firmly believe that while a part of me is like, oh my God, no children should ever be in those situations. And I'm not talking about like the questionable ones either. I'm literally talking about like, there's like, children should be children. They should be getting to play and learn and develop as humans while being taken care of and guided properly and modeled healthy relationships, healthy emotional nervous system regulation, all that junk. Not working in an environment with a bunch of adults where they're responsible for a paycheck. So that's what I mean about these situations. I'm not even talking about the situations where children should most definitely have no part of. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Which I will touch a little bit on that, but not a whole lot. As much as there's a part of me that like really wishes for no child to ever have to be a working anything while they're children, I also can stand in the perspective of like, but obviously that experience is prevalent and real, so there's a reason for it, and all we can do is learn from it and hopefully try to make it better. Hence this video. And just, yeah. Okay, let's go. Let's just first like touch on the reasons why having children working in the industry is probably not a great idea to begin with, okay? We're going to talk about these because if we know why it's not a great idea, maybe when we get to our solutions part of it, we can think about how to make these things that make it not a great idea help it be at least a better idea or an okay idea. You know, if that's really what the kid wants to do, like a parent doesn't have to feel like they're sending their little baby piglet into the lion's den, if you know what I mean. Also, shout out to Coca-Cola for being the marker for when my mental health sucks. And McDonald's for supplying it to me, I guess. Okay, first reason, children should not be involved in those things, or at least we need to better this part of it. Toxic industry practices, all right? The fact that the Coogan law had to be put into place, which is this law that basically guarantees that, in my opinion, a measly little percentage, I believe it's like 15. I think it's 15. Do not quote me. I haven't looked that up right this moment. But it's measly, okay? A measly little supposed 15-ish% of whatever that child makes actually gets put away and saved for them for when they are of age to access those funds. Even with this law having been put in place after, I'm sure, plenty of children were taken advantage of by their parents and guardians, which sucks. After a bunch of kids were already exploited and whatever, this law got put into place. I believe Shirley Temple was one who was heavily exploited by the lack of any regulation on this whatsoever. I think the Olsen twins were among the first few to actually get to exercise the law. But even with the Coogan law in place, this crap still gets so exploited. And parents like Jeanette McCurdy's mother that she spoke of in her really good book, I'm Glad My Mother Died. I'm glad my mom died. Something like that. Her mom would, basically use her money for things that were frivolous and it's not even like shitty. Like, sure, go get yourself like a nice haircut, but if you do that in 3 blowouts in 1 week, I'm not saying that's what her mom did, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of like exploiting the child is already being exploited, because in those circumstances, usually what's happening is that child is the breadwinner of the family. But then you have, this parent that is essentially like living vicariously through them and then also expending their resources in irresponsible ways and in just it's just shitty because it's not yours. It's not your money to spend. Like, it's one thing to take care of the family, you know, and it's another thing to like be very frivolous and selfish with it, which is what she described her mom to be doing. That's just one example, friends. Like, literally one example. It exposes kids to this. We're still under toxic industry practices, by the way. It exposes kids to adult-paced lifestyles, or rather, an adult-paced lifestyle, which can affect their development negatively. The fact of the matter is that unless you have like a very strong family-oriented foundation and support group, your development will get severely jostled and maybe even a little effed up by being subjected to having to work when you're a child. Okay, we're gonna go a little bit later into like, we're kind of like doing a funnel situation, right? We're instead of giving you like why childhood development is so fragile, this and that, we're giving you toxic practices that can affect those fragile stages. And then we're gonna talk about that. I'm all over the place here. I'm so sorry. Okay, we're gonna go. Let's just go. Keep going. So that happens when I haven't recorded in a little bit. Okay, so being exposed to an adult-paced lifestyle can definitely affect their development negatively. And this is because childhood really is very fragile, especially in certain stages of it. The last point under toxic industry practices, and I guess like let's talk about, obviously we get why the Coogan Law, the fact that it even had to exist sucks, but we also get the fact that it's still toxic because the Coogan Law, so many child stars or people that were child stars that are now adults today have gone on record to talk about how the Coogan Law really didn't help them as much as it was probably meant to. So we can see why that's toxic, obviously, right? Exposing kids to an adult-paced lifestyle, obviously that's toxic because in order for children to grow and develop, they need to be given their own time. They need to learn how they like to do things. They need to be given opportunity to initiate their own play and their own activities and to maneuver from one activity to the other in a way that feels good to them. That's how you develop autonomy and emotional regulation. I mean, not the entirety of it, obviously, but like that, those are a couple of ways you develop. Or rather, that is one of the ways you develop that, like being able to guide yourself through your life. You already can't control so much as a child. Like, getting to choose your own activity after you're done with your homework is something you have control of. When you get exposed to this adult-paced lifestyle where adults are keeping track of you, are telling you when to go to do things, when, you know, if you're not doing a take, then you need to be doing class, and when you're done with the take, then you go to lunch, and then you do this. It's like having a helicopter parent, and then when that child is no longer a child, right, and they're out of that environment, and maybe they weren't able to progress and keep going in that career, they may find themselves severely developmentally stunted and with absolutely no idea of who they are because they were always just following someone else's itinerary. Now, obviously, you know, that's not even adding to, or that's not even talking about the fact that these sets tend to be not, okay. I've been on sets. I've been the talent. I've been behind the scenes. There's always a level of stress. Regardless of whether it's flowing like a well-oiled machine or not, there's always a level of stress. And being a child, you're going to be so susceptible to that. Especially if you are younger than the age of 8. Because before the age of 8, give or take, children are still experiencing the world on a mirroring basis. They're intaking something completely, and then they're learning to mirror it back out. Why would we want to have our children intake a bunch of stress just by virtue of the environment that they're in? Right? Because not only are those sets stressful to a degree, they often go overtime and start extra early. And it's rigorous work. I do not feel bad for them. I get it. They get paid well and handsomely for the work that they do. I wanted to do that work. And I still do. I still want to act. But to have actor be my sole profession, that's work, guys. That actually is a lot of work. And not so much for an adult, but for a child, any work is too much work for a child. They just need to be living their lives, developing and learning how to be themselves. Okay. The last point in this, which really sucks, this can expose them to this. You guys know this can expose them to work with predatory producers and higher ups. That can then expose them to certain situations that would be criminal. And again, if you have a really solid foundation, your family is really behind you, really cares for you, you're not doing this to be the breadwinner because your family really needs you to get this role, there's a really good chance that kid will be totally okay. In fact, a good reason a lot of nepo babies that are child stars, a good reason why they come out better than most, in my opinion, and probably not even probably are able to carve out careers in their adulthoods if that's what they want. One, being nepo babies helps, right? But two, that shift from leaving child acting or whatever it is that they did isn't so jarring because, one, they never had to be the breadwinner, so there was never a whole lot of weight riding on what they did or whatever. Also, apologies for my heater. It has to happen, otherwise it gets too cold in here for the little Cleo. So another reason, other than they didn't have to be the breadwinner, is the fact that there's a really good chance that their family, one, by virtue of them already being in the industry, knows how to navigate the industry so that they don't end up in questionable and criminal situations, right? Not criminal on the child's part, obviously. Are probably more aware of whether their kid actually wants to do this or not, because there's no stake, right? Sure, there might be some people that really want their kids to be an actor just because they're an actor, but it seems you don't see too many nepo babies hating their lives out there, from my perspective. And I feel like that would be very apparent if someone was just I guess it's just the family business. I feel like they would have a very shitty attitude and we would be able to tell. But hey, that is it for toxic industry practices. A few examples, actually, of toxic industry practices. I jotted down here. So Nickelodeon and all of the alleged shit, and I have to say alleged, with Dan Schneider. If you don't know, I envy you. Oh my God. I envy you and whatever rock you've been living under, because it is not on this planet, and I appreciate that. Trigger warning for child criminal situations. Look it up. Yeah, not only Dan Schneider, but all of the higher ups that would just shut people up with NDAs and would allow him to keep doing what he's doing. And like Jeanette McCurdy she doesn't say it's him, okay? She doesn't say it's him, but we all know who the creator is. But she's got like a snippet about that, and the fact that we weren't talking about that enough when her book was doing press tours and shit, or she was doing press tours for her books and whatnot. Why were interviewers not asking her enough about that? I mean, I get it, rough topic, but I'm wondering, I'm like, are there NDAs elsewhere too? Anyway, if you want to get a little bit of what Dan Schneider allegedly could have been like, she's got a snippet in her book. Okay, this one's actually really new, really new, and I'm actually going to learn a little bit more about it. There's this really awesome lawyer on YouTube, by the way. Go follow her, Tyler. I think she's called like the Hollywood Lawyer or something. But I love her. She like breaks down just legal shit going on in Hollywood, and I'm like really interested in that. I'm really interested in that. So let's see. This is actually recent, and she did a video on it. So I'm gonna go watch the video because I haven't yet. But if you haven't heard, the actors of Romeo and Juliet, the 90s version of Romeo and Juliet, they are suing the director because they're saying that they were coerced into not wearing anything during their simulated intimate scene during that movie. Now, it's been a million years in the day since I've actually seen that movie. But it's not the one with Leo DiCaprio, by the way. But yeah, apparently like they were supposed to wear something like they usually do. Like they wear things to cover their actual bodies during simulated intimate scenes. And I'm using intimate because, you know, the algorithm. But apparently the director was like kind of a tyrant and essentially coerced and forced them. And they were 16 at the time. So I'm like really curious to learn more about that because, I mean, it just sounds like all kinds of freaking wrong, right? So like that's another example that literally just cropped up now. Like just cropped up very, very recently into the ether. These actors are, by the way, like, I don't even know how old they are. I feel like they're like in their 80s. Can you imagine living with that trauma for that long, just now speaking out? They probably never spoke out before because they probably would have never worked before. If they had, like they wouldn't have, that would have been their last film. Toxic industry practices, all right? My last point here, actually I have two more points because one story I just must share. My second to last point, the fact that when people say the casting couch, the quote, casting couch quote, people know what they're talking about. The fact that this is a recognizable term, and maybe not everybody knows what they're talking about, but enough people know what they're talking about when you mention that. When people mention that. That says enough about the toxic industry practices. Right? Right? And my last point, my last story, unfortunately, until our society gets to a place where we're just more emotionally intelligent. Maybe more of us decided that therapy isn't for crazy people and is actually for normal people who just want to be better humans. Maybe then we'll start to get better as a society. But until then, you're just gonna have questionable, shitty, and very underdeveloped people everywhere you go. And unfortunately, the entertainment industry allows those people, especially if they are good at what they do, to just run the fuck rampant, say whatever they want, and get away with it. And the story I want to share as the last example under toxic industry practices, and by the way, I just realized I had 2 points as to why being a child star is just not ideal. Toxic industry practices in childhood is so pivotal and fragile. So look at all my reasons. Toxic industry practices, which that's like a good thing in a way if I think about it, because hopefully that means those things can shift over time, and then the child star conundrum won't be such a conundrum anymore. It'll just be another pathway that parents tread with caution. You know, aware, conscious, intelligent parents tread with caution. Intelligent both emotionally as well as mentally. The last story I'll share, Bella Thorne, actually, it's her story. And she's gone on record to share this. I heard this from her mouth when she was doing a podcast. She said that when she was 10, there was this director that had the gall to tell her agent that the reason she didn't advance in the auditions was because he was uncomfortable because she was flirting with him. She was 10. So my point with this story, I mean, one, it seems like she had like a pretty strong family foundation. So, you know, her mom very clearly was like, this guy's a creep. This is effing creepy. Just making sure you know he's a creep, you know? But from what I read in her book, Jeanette McCurdy's mom might have slut-shamed her at 10. 10 years old. Not saying she would have, I don't know for sure. But it's not that far-fetched to me. Maybe not her. Some narcissistic, like really shitty stage parents, yeah. Yeah, and all because some imbecile in the industry decided a 10-year-old was flirting with him. So, when I say toxic industry practices, like, sure, yes, there are some things we can mitigate, hopefully, and over time change to help this industry not be as toxic towards children. But as long as this industry reveres imbeciles like that guy and lets them say shit like that, right? Because that agent probably couldn't be like, you know, you sound like ridiculous. You sound like a creepy ass motherfucker right now, right? You know that, right? She can't do that. Because then he may not ever see anybody he sends or she sends to him again to audition. Because that's how this toxic fucking industry works. So, still, enter at your own caution, especially if you're doing so with your children. But, like, that is just the scope of the kind of people you can encounter. A grown-ass man who thinks a 10-year-old child is flirting with him and is made uncomfortable by it. My next point, and I've already kind of made it, childhood is so pivotal and development is already so fragile. And this is true. Childhood is incredibly pivotal, and development is incredibly fragile. I've studied development. I have an early childhood education degree thingy that allows me to go work at any private preschool here in California. Not only that was the most recent studying that I've done around this, but I had a traumatic childhood, all right? Traumatic in ways that may not have seemed very traumatic from the outside, but on the inside, there was a lot of fucking trauma. And going through therapy and unraveling that and continuing to do so, by the way, this isn't something like I've done and it's over. Like, no, it's like I'm still learning to handle situations better when I'm triggered. I'm still learning to increase my distress tolerance. I'm still learning how to move through my dysthymia as opposed to let it drop me dead and stop me cold, right? Like, this is all a process, but in learning through this, the journey that I've gone from when I was, 21 to now, and then the fact that I'm a nanny, like that's what I've done for a long, long time. I watch it. I look at how fragile it is every single day. I witness it. I witness, the children that I take care of, the child that I take care of, go off of my cues, right? And people don't realize how fragile it actually is. Like, they do not fucking get it. But before 8 years old, and I'm not saying that like once they're 8, it's no longer fragile and we shouldn't be mindful. I'm just saying that once they're 8, there's a little bit more solidity there. But it's still fucking fragile. Right? There's still adolescence to go through and early adulthood. Like, it's still fucking fragile. And this is not an early childhood education seminar, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you why development is fragile. If you want to learn about human development, childhood development, how to properly care for children, like, please go learn that. Look up responsive parenting. That's the first thing you should do. And that will send you down the rabbit hole. I'm sure of it. And when you have so many people that, in my humble opinion, need therapy just from the quote perfectly fine quote childhoods that they had, I cannot imagine the slew of shit someone who was a child star has under that trauma belt. I'm not comparing, not saying one is worse or better, whatever. Obviously, one has advantages versus the other and whatnot, right? The person who was traumatized but wasn't famous has the advantage of having their trauma exist in a way that it's theirs to deal with, whereas the person who's famous is at a disadvantage because their trauma was out there for the world to see. Now, the famous person might be advantaged by the fact that while they were going through all that trauma, they were also probably racking up some money that they could then use to help them kickstart their life after all that trauma is done, right? Whereas the person who was traumatized and not famous and rich and whatever, that is a disadvantage for them. So it's not about better or worse or, this or that. It's really just about the fact that becoming famous and having the whole world watch your every move, and then worse, because the child stars of my day, and I don't know if they still do this to them, but the child stars when I was growing up were also forced to be these like impeccable role models, which is absolutely ridiculous, and in my opinion is the biggest part of the child star conundrum. Because not only are these kids exposed to an extremely toxic industry, they have all of their trauma and all of their, you know, shit out there kind of for the world to see already. They're developing in the public eye, essentially. Now they have to worry about never making a mistake. What the fuck? Like, what the fuck? Okay, so let's get into some solutions, maybe, like just a little bit, right? Let's not just talk through this into the void without thinking of anything constructive whatsoever, because in my opinion, this is something that when we talk about, I do want to bring something constructive to the table. I do want to not just complain about this and then go, well, I don't know how to fix it. I'm not saying all of my solutions are impeccable and amazing, but they're just some ideas, okay? So, and I'm trying to speak over the crying child next door, okay? So, my first suggestion is it would be great if we could invest into proper vetting of guardians and kids to ensure that only kids who really want to act / sing or perform whatever are doing so. Maybe have a psychologist. And I know that sounds expensive or whatever, but again, just throwing ideas out there. And okay, let's be real. These multi-million dollar productions can fucking afford it, okay? So you're not fucking hiring children that are fucking breadwinners of their fucking families. Like, anyhow. Proper vetting. So maybe having parents and children vetted by a psychologist at the audition. Send the kids home that seem like they're so nervous for reasons that have nothing to do with performing, right? Those kids are probably paired up with parents that are anxious and probably nervous as well, because those kids are probably relying on that job to exist and live. Yeah, this is what I said. Keep out the, quote, breadwinner, quote, kids who feel they have no choice. Kick them out. There's no reason. They don't want to be there. Those parents need to figure out another way to fucking feed their families because it's their responsibility to do so. Oh yeah, okay. I said keep out those kids who have no choice and their likely exploitative guardian / parent. Set therapists who help kids get back to neutral when doing really intense and strenuous work. Now, this is not so much at the entry point, but like, okay, once kids are in, they're doing the thing. Perhaps it's a good idea, and it would be kind of fun not even fun, it would be incredibly helpful to do this for auditions where it's really, really, really intense work. Maybe after each kid is done auditioning, they can talk to the therapist, and the therapist can be like, okay, how are you feeling? And the kid can tell them, and then as a sort of like sending them off, just be like, just remember, this is not you going through these emotions, this is a character. You are, have them state their name, maybe like their favorite color, something like that. Something to help them get back to neutral. Because a lot of these parents are not helping these kids get back to neutral because they're not even aware of how to parent children in the first place. But this would be helpful. If you're not doing it for really intense auditions, okay, fine, you're putting the responsibility on the parent, which if you're vetting, right? If you're vetting whether those parents and kids should even be there, hopefully that means that what's left over are the parents that are emotionally and mentally aware and intelligent around those things. They hopefully will help their kid get back to neutral and whatnot. However, definitely have those therapists on set to help those kids that are acting through those really difficult and intense emotions. Help them get back to who they are, ground themselves back into their identities, because that's really important, especially when they're going off and making believe they're a bunch of other people. Even if it's for work, even if there's a distinction. When you are a child, and especially before you're 8 years old, you are living on a mirroring basis. Meaning it's very easy to get your self-identity confused with other things and people, and especially the characters you play. Proper education and even standardized testing to ensure that these kids are learning what kids are learning in school, to set them up well to be able to leave the industry if they desire. This is so important. Bella Thorne is another one that really talks about this and really advocates for this, because it's really just absolutely ludicrous that these kids, like, they have set teachers and they have time that they should be learning and whatnot, but they don't learn what kids learn when they go to school in the way that they could go, and apply for a college when they're junior year age. I don't even know if most of them take the GED test. I have no idea. But on a couple occasions now, both Jeanette McCurdy and Bella Thorne, they worked for Nickelodeon and Disney. You would think those set teachers would be the absolute best, right? But no, it's also an issue of I'm sure that they're spending the bare minimum amount of time in those classrooms. And then also, if you're being overworked, from every angle, and this actually segues really well into my next point. If you're being overworked from every angle, it's going to be really difficult to pay attention and really retain that hour or two of school that you got that day, because that's all that shooting allowed. I don't know the exact laws and rules around this, but do not come at me and say that Hollywood does not bend rules all the fucking time to their whim, because they do. Okay? My next point, cross-communication and accountability of child stars teams to coordinate projects and schedules in a way that the child isn't overworked and has time to play, as well as have a well-rounded education. This is exactly what I was just talking about. If they are overworked from every angle. So a really good example of a real life example of this is the essay written by, is it Maisie Williams? Game of Thrones actress, played Arya. I believe it's her. No, it's not her. It's not her. It's the girl. She was in Disney Channel. She did Camp Rock. She was in Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. She was the girl who wrote the skateboard. She was in the Missy Elliott video. That's kind of what popped her off. The dancer. But she does a phenomenal autobiographical essay. And she talks about how it wasn't just that she was shooting Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. She was also doing a press arrangement for this and a premiere for that and a this and this and a that and that. And it's all happening at the same time. Now, we have overworked adults in the industry, right? And they struggle. Can you imagine being a kid? You're just trying to learn how to function as a human and who you are as a human. And now you have more engagements and things on your calendar than your elementary school teacher would have had if you went to elementary school. What? So this is because these teams aren't cross-communicating, right? They're it's not like their PR people are going, okay, well, she already has this going on today, so we're only going to keep it at this PR arrangement this week, because then that way she has time to actually finish her school day as well as relax a little bit before next round of shooting starts. No, it's none of that. It's oh, can we fit it? Great, it's in. Never mind when that child is going to sleep or, learn, or, I mean, the only thing is like, sure, they make sure they eat, thank God, but if they didn't, they wouldn't have talent. So I'm like, should I praise you for doing the bare necessities? I don't think so. So that would be really, really incredible and really important, like cross communication and accountability of the child star's welfare between these teams to ensure that that child, they're not going to have a normal childhood, but they can at least hopefully have some time to play and explore who they are as a person, as well as some time to get an actual education, an education that they can stand on if they ever want to leave this thing before they make enough money to do so without feeling like they're not going to be okay in life. My last point, and I already touched on it a little bit. Let's stop asking and expecting these child stars to be fucking role models. Wow, I really thought that was good. I put a lot more umph into that than it yielded. I'm over it. But like, real talk though, the fact that we ever put that on them, I do not use this phrase lightly, shame on society. Shame on society. Shame on the lazy ass fucking parents that expected little teeny bopper developing children to model how to be good humans to their children. No. Shame on that shit. 'Cause no. It is not anyone's job to model what it is to be a good human to your children other than yours. That is your job. Okay? Ooh, echo. Stop. I know what she was gonna say. Thanks, girl. I've just called her girl. Okay. It is no one's job to model what it is to be a great human to your children, but your own. And the fact that we had people slut-shaming Miley Cyrus for doing a photo shoot that some people deemed risky, but that she was perfectly fine and safe in. You know, one of her parents were present. She felt completely safe. She was just enjoying being herself and taking these photos, and people slut shamed her because apparently it's her job to tell their children how to be good humans and act. If we do nothing, if we do jack shit to help the child star conundrum, let us at least do this. Take the responsibility of being a good role model to the children of the world off of these developing children that happen to be growing up in the limelight, and put it back on ourselves. Because the adults of society, it's our responsibility to model what it is to be great humans to the children of society, and especially if those children are our own. And if that's not the job you signed up for, if you've already had kids, it's too fucking late. That is the job you signed up for. To model what it is to be the kind of adult and human that you would hope they become. So those are my thoughts. Those are my solutions, or ideas, I should say, for a solution. This is a really, really tricky topic, and it's a really, really tricky situation. And this is why I called it a conundrum. It's not going to go anywhere. We're not going to cast robots in our movies, at least not in this day and age. But hopefully there are some things we can do to shed some light into the really dark corners of this industry and make it a little bit more friendly towards the children that go into it. Let me know your thoughts. Do you know anybody who is a child star or was a child star? Were you yourself one and you aren't now? Do you just have thoughts on this, right? Is this something you've been thinking about for a little bit? What did you think of my thoughts? Is there anything that I said that stood out to you? Anything that you agree with or disagree with? Always remember to be kind. And yeah, I would really love to know. This is a really, really interesting thing. And like I said, it's just got to get talked to death until something gets done about it. So let's talk. But next, before we end it, I am going to do my tarot reading. I am not offering tarot readings for January because I've got some crazy work schedules going right now, but I am going to be doing the 1-card reading at the end of my episodes and videos. So let's do that. I'm using the beautiful botanical tarot. Man, I feel for these peeps next door. That kid is not regulating. Poor baby. Okay, let's see. So I got the botanical tarot here. It's really gorgeous and lovely, but it's also kind of cryptic. It has no words, just symbols. So if we get a major arcana card, I'm going to have to look in the booklet to find out exactly what it is. But it's like the language of flowers and it's gorgeous. So let's go. What is our message today? I do not have to look. Haha. We get, I believe this, I do have to look, I want to double check, but I'm pretty sure. This is the 3 of Wands. I'm going to double check here. Yes, it is. Okay, cool. This is the 3 of Wands. Okay, first of all, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, look at this card. Oh my God. These cards are just absolutely gorgeous. So if you're listening, let me describe it to you. It is, first of all, the backdrop is black, completely black. And then at the very top of the card, you have the Roman numeral 3, and then you have the little symbol that they have for wands, which is, it's like there's a stick, and then there is just a semicircle where in the middle of the semicircle is where it meets the stick that's standing straight up next to the Roman numeral. The semicircle is facing up, so if the semicircle is a crescent moon, the moon's ends are facing up. So you already have like the wand starting to form, and then right in the little crook where the crescent moon closes in, right, there's a little circle. And that's their symbol for wands. And that is up there in the top of the card. And then you have this really interesting, what looks to be like a wooden or a metal spike. It looks to be like growing out of the ground, but obviously it's not growing out of the ground. In fact, it looks like a structure that's been there for a long time. And it's rusted. And you have these beautiful leaves and flowers growing around it. It actually looks like sakura flowers. It looks like a cherry blossom flower. And you have this, it looks a little bit like a bracelet with a bead on it, with a bead at the end. You know those bracelets that it's like a loop, and then the two ends are like stuck through a bead, and then you can adjust the bracelet. It's like that, and it's very loose, and you have the big spike in the middle, and then you have these two what look to be wands, metal looking wands, because they look a lot like the symbol for the wand, except without the crescent moon part. So it's essentially just like a circle and then a stick connected to that circle and looped in one of those circles, right? Because this is the 3 of wands. So you have this big metal spike as a wand, and then these two on either side of it. And looped through one of the circles, the one on the left, you have this like bracelet thing with an orange bead. Now, what do I get from this? I I almost didn't use this deck because this deck kind of terrifies me because there's no words, there's nothing going on really except for these beautiful floral pictures. And I was like, you know what? I believe in myself. Like, let's just do this. And the message that we have here today, first of all, let's look at the number 3. The number 3 is a number that represents minor change. So perhaps there's something going on that's kind of like shaking up your world just a little bit. That's okay. Let it. The thing about change is that it is the only constant. And I know that that sounds like some like Buddhism shit or some like philosophical shit, but it's honestly very true. It's the only fucking constant, okay? And you can either weather change like a rigid structure, like the rusted wands here, or you can weather change like plants and like nature. It's so interesting because we started this episode talking about the wisdom that is in nature, and we kind of close out on it. You can either weather change in a very rigid manner, or you can weather change in a very fluid manner. It honestly just depends on what you choose to do. And sometimes the element of choice only comes after awareness, because oftentimes if you're just working from the subconscious and working with autopilot, you're just doing what you've been taught to do. But when you get aware of what you're actually doing, you are able to either keep doing what you're doing, or you're able to grow and you're able to change your tune a little bit. Maybe not right away, maybe not severely, and it'll take practice, but you can. And if you haven't caught on yet, I'm comparing what it is like to deal with change in a rigid way by using these wands, because they're rusting. They're rusting and they're fading, and they're essentially the least lively part of this card. And the thing about wands is that it corresponds to the sacral chakra, and it corresponds to your center of pleasure and excitement and drive. So while the wands are muted to highlight the plants, of course, you've got the botanical tarot here, it's also worth noting that as rigid as these metal wands are, they are still going to change. They're still going to rust and then completely shift color, right? They're going to go from this muted black to this red, this bright, bright, rusty red. So the message in here is, how are you going to weather the change? Are you going to stay strong and stay standing even when the wind begs you to just lay down because you'll be safer that way? Or are you going to dig your heels into your conviction that standing is the way, even as you get scraped in things by things getting carried in the wind? Right? Or we could flip it, like, say standing is the way, but you're so used to laying down and you just do what you're used to doing. Okay. Now that you know that you're just doing what you're used to doing, are you gonna take the way that benefits you more? Or are you gonna be rigid and just lay down? Whatever it is that you're being rigid about, it's close to your heart, and that's okay. But being rigid about it won't keep it from breaking or changing. It'll just change without you. So, yeah, how will you go through change? Thank you so much for the wisdom of the flowers. God, this deck is just beautiful. And thank you so much. If you've made it so far, this far, thank you. I really, really, really appreciate it. And please subscribe and click the bell, because I do post regularly, though I don't post on a schedule. And I'm very proud of myself even for the fact that I did not procrastinate into a month from now, essentially. So thank you so much for honestly keeping me accountable just by existing, those of you that have subscribed. And if you're subscribing now or have subscribed through this video, I'm so incredibly appreciative of that, and I'm excited to see you next time. Yeah, stay mystical, stay grounded, click that bell, click the like button, click the subscribe button, help this channel grow, because it helps me become a full-time content creator. And when I'm a full-time content creator, I literally have no fucking reason to procrastinate. I need to start imagining that reality. Manifestation moment. Stay mystical, stay grounded. I really appreciate you, and I'll catch you next time.